The morning light filtered through thin curtains as Natalie Thompson buttoned her cream blouse and tied her hair into a neat bun. She had always believed in routine. Order was comfort. Numbers behaved, schedules obeyed, and she liked that. At 26, she lived quietly in a small apartment 2 blocks from the accounting firm where she worked. She had no one waiting at home, no drama, no chaos. Just coffee, spreadsheets, and silence. That morning, she was thinking about finishing her quarterly report when she walked into the clinic for her regular flu shot. It was something she did every year, a habit that made her feel responsible. The clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender air freshener. The receptionist barely looked up when Natalie signed her name. Everything felt normal, until she noticed how the nurse kept glancing at the door. The nurse's badge read, Claire, and there was a tremor in her hands as she shuffled through files. Natalie smiled politely, unaware that behind the counter, 2 identical folders sat side by side. One was hers. One belonged to a patient scheduled for an artificial insemination trial funded by a private donor. Claire's eyes darted between them, then she grabbed one without double-checking. "You're Natalie Thompson?" the nurse asked, her voice a little too fast. "Yes," Natalie said, tucking her purse under the chair. "Just the annual shot." The nurse nodded, though her eyes betrayed confusion. She prepared a syringe filled with a clear liquid, labeled only with a code. Natalie looked away as the alcohol swab brushed her arm. She didn't see the slight frown on Claire's face, or the hesitation before the needle pierced skin. A small sting. A deep breath. It was over in seconds. "That's it?" Natalie asked, smiling faintly. "Yes," Claire said, avoiding eye contact. "Just routine testing. You may feel a little lightheaded." She scribbled something on a chart and excused herself, muttering about needing a supervisor's signature. Natalie sat there for a moment, uncertain why her heart was beating faster than usual. Maybe she was overthinking. Maybe she just needed coffee. Still, something about the nurse's hurried exit lingered like a whisper she couldn't catch. She walked out into the afternoon light, phone pressed to her ear, calling a client about tax returns. Life snapped back into its usual rhythm. Crosswalk beeps, car horns, footsteps. She didn't notice the man in a black suit across the street, watching the clinic's door. He was there for someone else entirely, yet fate's invisible thread had already tied him to her. That night, Natalie made dinner for one, and reviewed her notes for tomorrow's audit. The small bandage on her arm stung when she moved, but she brushed it off. She didn't know that in a sterile lab downstairs, a nurse was panicking over a missing vial, a mismatched file, and a signature she wasn't supposed to forge. Natalie went to bed early, the city's hum lulling her to sleep. She dreamed of numbers floating through fog, endless rows of equations that refused to balance. In another part of the city, a man with cold eyes and too many secrets received a call that would change everything. And somewhere inside Natalie's body, something unseen began. A spark, a heartbeat waiting to exist. The faint sting in her arm faded by morning, but the unease stayed, hidden beneath the calm surface of her well-ordered life. She told herself it was nothing, just a clinic visit like every other year. She didn't know it yet, but the life she had built so carefully was about to be rewritten by one tiny mistake. One that would bind her forever to a world she didn't even know existed. Fate had already taken her hand. The morning sun was bright. But Natalie felt heavy as if she had been walking through fog for weeks. Her stomach churned again. She barely made it to the sink before the wave of sickness hit her. She had never been sick like this before. Not this constant nausea, not this strange fluttering in her body. It had been only a few weeks since her visit to the clinic, and she kept telling herself it was just stress. The tax season was always hard for her firm, but deep down, a quiet voice whispered something she refused. To her that afternoon, she stopped by the pharmacy on her way home. Her fingers trembled as she grabbed a pregnancy test. She laughed at herself, a nervous, dry laugh. It was ridiculous. She wasn't even seeing anyone she couldn't possibly be, but as she waited in her bathroom, watching that tiny white stick bloom with color, her heart began to race. The second line appeared faint, but real. Her breath caught in her throat. She dropped the test on the counter. Her reflection in the mirror looked pale, terrified, unreal. She tried again. 2 more tests, both the same result: pregnant. The word echoed in her head until it lost meaning. She sank to the floor, clutching her knees, whispering, "No, this can't be happening. I haven't been with anyone." The next morning, she returned to the clinic demanding answers. Her voice cracked as she spoke to the receptionist, who barely looked up until Natalie's words came out sharp and trembling. "There's been a mistake. I need to see the doctor right now." Dr. Evans appeared calm. Too calm. He invited her into his office, closed the blinds, and sat behind his desk. His eyes were careful, like a man walking on glass. "Miss Thompson," he began, "I need you to stay calm. There was an incident a few weeks ago. A procedural mix-up." Natalie blinked, trying to process his words. Her voice was barely a whisper. "What kind of mix-up?" He hesitated before continuing. "The nurse that day used the wrong file. You were given an injection meant for a fertility donor program, not a vaccine." Her heart stopped. The air disappeared from the room. She shook her head, unable to form words. "You're saying I was artificially inseminated," she whispered, her voice trembling. The doctor looked away. "It was an accident. I swear we discovered it only after reviewing the samples." Her pulse pounded in her ears. "Whose child is it?" she demanded. The silence that followed felt endless. Dr. Evans finally said, "The donor's name is confidential, but he's aware of what happened." "Aware," she repeated, her voice breaking. "How can you even say that you stole my choice? You stole my life." She stood, her legs unsteady. The doctor tried to reach for her, but she backed away. "Don't touch me. I trusted you." She stumbled out of the clinic into the cold afternoon air. The city moved around her. Uncaring people laughed, cars honked, but she couldn't hear anything except her heartbeat. The ground felt like it might crumble under her feet. She pressed a hand to her stomach, tears blurring her vision. She wasn't alone anymore. She didn't know how or why, but something had changed inside her. In a glass tower across the city, a man stared at a phone call that shattered his control. The donor file was compromised. "Sir, the sample was used on the wrong patient." Dante Jordano leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening. "Wrong patient." The words sounded unreal. The child meant to continue his legacy, now growing inside a stranger. "Find her," he ordered, his voice low. "Dangerous. No one touches her. Not until I know who she is." While Natalie walked home, shaking and lost, unaware that someone powerful had just spoken her name, her life had already changed forever. The night was darker than usual, and Dante Jordano stood by the tall glass window of his penthouse. Staring at the city lights below, his mind was a storm of disbelief and anger. The call from his private clinic had replayed in his head for hours. An error in procedure. They had said his genetic material accidentally used on a woman he had never met for a man like Dante, who controlled empires, who moved money and men like chess pieces. The word accident did not exist. Everything in his life was planned, precise, and untouchable until no. He poured a drink, but his hand didn't tremble. He was too used to chaos to fear it. Still, something in this mistake felt different, deeper, more personal. He demanded the file from his assistant, every detail of the woman, every trace of her life. When the photo appeared on the screen, his breath caught. Natalie Thompson, age 26, accountant, ordinary background, clean record. No ties to anyone. Her eyes in the picture were calm, intelligent, unaware that her world had collided with his. Dante studied her face for a long time. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she looked so real, untouched by greed or lies. He whispered to himself, "If she carries my blood, she is under my protection." He had lost enough in his life to know the price of mistakes and the price of silence. Across town, Natalie sat in her small apartment, staring at the ultrasound photo she had been given. The doctor's words echoed in her mind. Your pregnancy is stable, but you must avoid stress. She almost laughed. What could be more stressful than carrying a stranger's child? She felt torn between anger and confusion. She didn't want money or pity. She just wanted her life back. The next morning, she found an envelope slipped under her door. No name, just a gold-embossed seal inside was a letter from the clinic requesting her to meet the donor for legal settlement. Her hands shook as she read the final line. He has requested your presence personally. She almost didn't go, but curiosity and fear pulled her there. When the elevator doors opened to the top floor, she stepped into a room of glass marble and silence. A tall man stood by the window, his back turned. She spoke quietly. Mr. Jordano. He turned, and in that instant everything inside her froze. He was power carved into flesh, his dark eyes sharp, his voice low. Miss Thompson, thank you for coming. The air between them felt electric. Charged by something unspoken, he told her the clinic had informed him of everything, that he was here to take responsibility. His words were calm, but his presence made her heart race. She tried to stay composed. I don't want anything from you, she said, her voice trembling. He smiled slightly. Then what do you want? I want my life back, she replied. For a moment, neither spoke. His gaze softened, barely noticeable but real. I can't undo what happened, he said quietly, but I can make sure you are never harmed for this. She frowned, confused, until he added people in. My world might see you as leverage. Before she could ask what that meant, the lights flickered. The sound of shattering glass broke the silence. A bullet cracked through the window, embedding in the wall behind her. Dante moved fast, pulling her down, covering her with his body. Stay down, he ordered, his voice fierce. She felt his heartbeat against her back, steady, controlled, terrifyingly calm. Within seconds, his men flooded the room. Guns drawn, chaos everywhere. Natalie gasped, shaking as Dante lifted her to her feet. Are you hurt? She shook her head, his hand still on her arm, his eyes dark with fury. Someone knows about you. He muttered, then more quietly. And that means you're not safe anymore. She stared at him, unable to speak. Who are you really? He looked at her with a gaze that burned through every wall she had ever built. I'm the man whose world you've just entered, and there's no way out now, as they stepped into the black car waiting outside. Natalie realized that the mistake the clinic made had already spiraled into something far more dangerous than she could imagine. Fate had not only taken her hand, it had placed her in the arms of a man feared by the world. The rain was falling hard when Natalie stepped into Dante Jordano's penthouse for the second time. Her clothes clung to her skin, her hair dripping as the guards checked her bag and closed the door behind her. She wanted to run, but where could she go? The world outside no longer felt safe, and the man standing by, the fireplace with that unreadable gaze, held the only answers she had left. Dante's voice was low as thunder. You should not have been walking alone after what happened at the clinic, he said. She crossed her arms, defiant and scared. I didn't ask. For a bodyguard, I didn't ask for any of this. He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes dark but steady. No, you didn't. But someone out there wants to use you against me. That's not something I can ignore. She wanted to argue, but his words hid a truth she couldn't deny. She had seen the bullet hole. She had felt his body shield hers. She still woke up sweating at night, remembering it. He motioned for her to sit by the fire. She hesitated but sat, her hands trembling slightly. Dante poured 2 glasses of water and handed her one. Not wine, not whiskey, just water. The gesture was simple, almost gentle. He said, the men who tried to attack you belonged to Viktor Petrov, a man who believes pain is power. He found out about the pregnancy, and Thinks he can use you to destroy me? She stared at him, confusion in her eyes. Why me? I don't even know you because he knows what you carry. Dante said softly. His words sank in, and she touched her stomach instinctively. Fear rushed through her chest. So what happens now? She asked. He looked at her with something like regret. You stay here until I can guarantee your safety. This place is protected by people who would die before letting harm come to you. She wanted to refuse. She didn't trust him, but she didn't trust the world either. And deep inside, a quiet voice whispered that being near him made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Safe yet, dangerously alive. Days turned into nights in that glass fortress. She learned his routines, how he spent hours reading files or standing by the window, staring at the skyline like a man haunted by his own empire. He barely spoke of his past, but she could see it in his eyes. The weight of sins too heavy to name. One evening she found him, in the piano room, fingers resting on the keys but not playing. She stood in the doorway listening to the silence between them. You look like you're fighting ghosts, she said. He smiled faintly. I stopped fighting them a long time ago. Now I just live with them. She walked closer, her heart pounding. Maybe you don't have to. He looked up, meeting her gaze for a long second. The air between them felt fragile, electric later that night. A storm rolled in thunder, shaking the windows. Natalie couldn't sleep. She walked to the balcony and found Dante already there. Rain soaking his shirt, his eyes fixed on the lightning. I've done terrible things, he said without turning around. Things I can't undo. She stepped closer, her voice barely above the rain. Then, maybe this is your chance to do something right. He turned to her slowly. The storm reflected in his eyes. Maybe you're the one thing I wasn't meant to lose. Before she could speak, lightning flashed, and in that white burst of light she saw movement below figures in the shadows. She opened her mouth to warn him, but Dante was already moving, his gun drawn. Stay back. He ordered. Glass shattered and chaos erupted. His guards rushed in, pulling her away as he disappeared down the stairs. The last thing she saw was his figure vanishing into darkness, gunfire echoing through the storm, her heart pounding with one truth she could no longer deny. She was no longer just the woman caught in a mistake. She was now part of a world of blood, loyalty, and fate, and she wasn't sure if she would survive it or be forever changed by it. The night after the attack felt endless. Every sound made Natalie jump. Every creak in the walls sounded like danger. Waiting outside, the guards patrolled the hallway, their radios whispering static and low voices. Dante had disappeared into his office, hours ago, leaving her alone with her thoughts and fear. She sat on the couch, staring at the rain streaking down the window, wondering how her life had turned into something out of a nightmare. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Leave the penthouse. If you want to live. Her blood turned cold. She stood up, shaking her head, whispering, No, this can't be real. Before she could think, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. She backed away, her hands searching for her phone flashlight, but a shadow moved across the glass outside. The door burst open. A masked man rushed in. She screamed. His hand reached for her wrist, but before he could drag her away, a deafening gunshot split the air. The man fell, and Dante appeared in the doorway, his eyes burning with rage, his chest rising and falling like a man barely holding himself back. He pulled her behind him, shouting orders to his men. Secure the floor, find who sent him. She clung to him, shaking, unable to breathe. He turned to her, his hand on her cheek. Are you hurt? She shook her head, unable to speak. Tears mixing with the rain on her face, he whispered, You're safe now. I swear to you nothing will happen to you again. After the chaos, the guards cleared the body and the floor went quiet. Dante didn't let her go. He guided her to his study where the fire burned low. Sit, he said. She obeyed, this time too tired to argue. He knelt beside her. Not as a mafia boss, but as a man who had seen too much blood. His hand brushed hers. I know you don't trust me, but you have to let me protect you. She looked into his eyes and saw something she didn't expect. Fear not for himself, but for her, she whispered. Why are they doing this to me? Because you carry something priceless to them and everything to me. His voice cracked at the last words. She didn't know what to say. Her heart raced, and for the first time she saw the loneliness behind his power. The man beneath the legend days past the house became both prison and sanctuary. Dante kept her close. His men doubled security. She watched him move through rooms giving orders, his tone cold, his posture unbreakable. But every night she saw him sit by her door until she fell asleep, as if her heartbeat had become the only sound that could calm his one morning. She found him in the kitchen making coffee. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes. She said, You don't have to watch me every second. He smiled faintly. I don't have to, but I want to. You're the only thing in this world I haven't already lost. She felt her chest tighten. She wanted to say something, but words failed her. The peace didn't last that afternoon. An explosion shook the estate. The sound so loud the windows rattled, she screamed. Dante grabbed her, pulling her to the floor. The alarms wailed as smoke filled the hallway. His voice was steady. Move with me, don't look back. He led her through the secret corridor behind the library walls to a hidden elevator. As they descended, she felt his arm around her, protective, unyielding. Her voice broke. What if they find us? He looked down at her eyes, dark and certain. Then they'll have to go through me first. The elevator opened into an underground bunker. The air, cold. The lights dim. He held her close, whispering, It's over for now, you're safe. But as the elevator door closed behind them, she caught sight of his reflection in the metal wall. His expression wasn't relief. It was something darker. A man ready. For Natalie realized then that safety around Dante Jordano was an illusion. The only thing more dangerous than his enemies was the man himself. And yet, even as fear coursed through her, she knew she couldn't walk away. Something bound them stronger than fear, stronger than fate, and it was only just beginning. The safe house was hidden deep in the hills, away from the lights of the city. Natalie stood by the window watching fog crawl across the glass. Her heart still hadn't stopped racing since the explosion. Everything felt unreal. The silence too thick, the air too cold. She could still smell the smoke in her hair and feel Dante's arm around her waist when he pulled her from the fire. He was on the phone again, his voice low, sharp, full of control and rage. She couldn't hear every word, but she caught pieces. Find the leak. No survivors. His tone made her shiver, but she also knew without him, she would be dead. When he finally ended the call, she asked quietly how many people are after. You? Dante turned, his eyes meeting hers. It isn't about how many. It's about who. He stepped closer and his voice softened. They won't stop until they get what they want. She frowned. And what is that? His eyes lowered to her stomach before he whispered, You. The truth hit like lightning. She took a step back, her voice breaking. You think they'll come for me? He nodded. They already have. The only reason you're breathing right now is because they underestimated how far I'd go to keep you safe. The room went quiet again. Thunder rolled outside. He poured himself a drink but didn't touch it. She watched him. His face carved with exhaustion. He looked like a man fighting ghosts. He finally spoke. When I was 15. I watched my father die because he trusted the wrong man. Since then, I've learned that everyone can be bought, everyone but you. She didn't know what to say. Something in her chest ached. He wasn't the monster the news painted him to be. There was something broken and human beneath all that steel. Later that night, she found him sitting by the fire, staring at nothing. She hesitated, then sat beside him without a word. They stayed like that for a long time, the firelight flickering across their faces. Finally she said quietly, "Maybe you don't have to fight alone anymore." He looked at her as if she'd said something dangerous. His hand brushed hers, and for the first time she didn't pull away. The next morning sunlight spilled across the wooden floors for a brief moment. It felt peaceful until Dante's right-hand man, Marco, burst through the door, breathless. "Boss, we found the traitor," before Dante could respond. Another explosion shook the ground. The windows cracked. The alarm screamed. And Natalie's heart jumped into her throat. Dante grabbed her hand, his voice low but fierce. "Come with me." They ran through the corridor, smoke chasing them down the hall. He pressed a hidden switch and a steel door opened, revealing a tunnel of stone light flickering. At the far end, his arm wrapped around her protectively as they ran together, the world behind them collapsing in flame. When they finally reached the end of the tunnel, she gasped for air, her body shaking. Dante pressed her against the wall, his eyes searching hers. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. His hand cupped her face gently, and he whispered, "I told you I would protect you even if it kills me." For a moment time stopped the danger, the noise. Everything disappeared, and all she could see was the man who had saved her again and again. Their foreheads touched her voice. A whisper. "Why me, Dante?" "Because fate made you mine." Before either of us had a choice. Outside, the tunnel gunfire echoed. The war was not over, but something inside Natalie changed in that moment. Fear gave way to something she could no longer deny. She wasn't just surviving. She was falling. And she knew that loving a man like Dante Jordano could either save her soul or destroy it forever. The storm had ended, but the silence that followed was worse. The safe house lay in ruins, and Dante's men worked through the smoke, dragging away debris, while he stood in the center of it all. Eyes hard, jaw clenched. His shirt was torn, his hands covered in soot, but his voice carried authority. "No one leaves until we know who planted the bomb." Natalie watched him from the doorway, her heart pounding at how calm he seemed when the world around him was burning. Later, when the sun began to rise, he walked toward her. She noticed the cut on his temple and reached out without thinking. He caught her wrist gently, his eyes soft for the first time since the night began. "You shouldn't be near me," he said quietly. "Danger follows me wherever I go." She looked up at him, tears welling. "Then why are you still here?" He hesitated. "Because leaving you would be the one danger I can't survive." They left the city that evening, heading north through endless forests until they reached a secluded estate. Surrounded by high walls and guarded gates, the air was different. There, calmer but thick with secrets. Natalie stepped out of the car and stared at the lake shimmering beneath the fading light. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Dante stood behind her, his voice low and heavy. "It's safe." Inside the mansion, every corner was silent, yet watched cameras in the ceilings. Guards at every exit. Dante showed her to a large room overlooking the water. "You'll stay here until I say otherwise." She turned to him, her voice trembling. "Am I a prisoner or a guest?" He paused, looking at her long enough for her to feel the weight of his answer. Maybe both days passed and the tension between them grew like a storm waiting to break. She tried to keep her distance, but every night she found herself listening for his footsteps, the sound of his voice, the calm he brought after the chaos of gunfire and fear. Sometimes he would appear at her door, checking that she was safe. Other times she caught him watching, her from the balcony, his expression unreadable. One night, she wandered into the music room. The piano gleamed under soft light. She sat hesitantly pressing a single key. The note hung in the air before another joined it, then another when she looked. Up he was there, his hand sliding beside hers on the key's play. He said, his voice low. She shook her head. I don't remember how he leaned closer. Then I'll remind you. His fingers guided hers. Their hands moved together. The melody, haunting gentle. Something inside her broke open. She whispered, "You don't have to protect me all the time. You'll break." He looked at her, a hint of a smile. "I'm already broken, Natalie, but you make me forget." Before she could answer, the door burst open. Marco rushed. "In breathless, boss, we found the mole. It's Carlo Dante's oldest lieutenant, betrayed him for money and a promise from Petrov." The name sent a chill through the room. Dante's face darkened. His voice turned to steel. "Where is he?" Marco hesitated. "He's here." He came to confess, before they could react. Gunfire shattered the windows. A bullet grazed Dante's shoulder as he pulled Natalie down. Chaos exploded, guards shouting, bullets tearing through walls. Dante covered her with his body again. "Get her out," he roared. His men returned fire, dragging Carlo's lifeless body from the hall, blood staining the marble. Natalie clung to Dante, trembling. "Are you hurt?" she cried. He shook his head, breathing hard. "It's nothing." But when she looked at his arm, blood soaked through his sleeve, she pressed her hand against it, shaking. "Stop talking," she whispered. "You've done enough." He tried to smile. "I'll never be done when it comes to you." That night, after the shooting stopped the house quiet again, Natalie sat by his bedside while he slept, his face pale in the dim light. She touched his hand gently and whispered, "You keep saving me, but who will save you?" Outside, the wind howled over the lake, and deep inside the house, someone moved in the shadows, a figure watching them both, whispering into a phone. "He's fallen for her? The boss will want to know." And somewhere far away, Viktor Petrov smiled in the dark, knowing he had just found Dante Jordano's greatest weakness. The wind over the lake carried a chill that felt like a warning the morning after the attack. Dante's mansion stood in uneasy silence. His men patrolled the grounds with weapons drawn, their eyes scanning the trees every few minutes. Natalie sat by the window watching them, her hand resting gently on her stomach. She had stopped trying to convince herself this was temporary because deep down, she knew there was no way back to the life she once had. Dante appeared behind her, his voice rough from lack of sleep. "We found Carlo's phone. It was transmitting coordinates to someone in the city." Her heart tightened. "Petrov?" she asked. He nodded, and then looked at her with something close to guilt. "They know where you are, Natalie. We have to move again." She stood facing him, her fear replaced by anger. "How long will we keep running?" He hesitated, his jaw clenching as if he was fighting himself. "Until I can make sure you're safe." That afternoon, a storm gathered over the hills. Dante called a meeting in the underground chamber. The place felt like a war room. Maps, weapons, and files scattered across the table. Marco stood beside him, reading reports. Their enemies were moving faster than anyone expected. Dante's voice cut through the tension. "We strike tonight. I won't wait for them to come again." Natalie listened from the stairs, unseen. His tone was deadly, but what froze her was the next sentence. "If they want her, they'll have to come for me." She stepped forward, her voice trembling. "You're using me as bait." He looked up shocked, then shook his head. "No, I would never." She stared at him through tears. "But you just did." He tried to explain it was the only way to end this, to draw Petrov out once and for all. But all she could hear was betrayal ringing in her chest after everything. After the promises, she turned away, her voice breaking. "You said you'd protect me, not use me." That night, rain fell hard against the windows. She locked herself in her room, trying to steady her breath. The storm outside mirrored the one inside her heart. She couldn't tell if the ache she felt was from fear or from realizing how much she cared for the man who had broken every rule of her world. She whispered into the darkness, "I can't keep living in his shadow." Downstairs, Dante stood alone, staring at the rain, his reflection fractured in the glass. He hated himself for what he was about to do. But there was no other choice. He couldn't keep her safe without ending this warm. Midnight came. The lights flickered and suddenly, the security alarm screamed through the mansion. Petrov's men had arrived faster than expected. Glass-shattered gunfire erupted. Dante grabbed his weapon, shouting orders. "Get her out now." Natalie burst from her room as Marco rushed her toward the back hall, but before they could reach the stairs, a man stepped from the shadows. Gun raised. She froze fear, paralyzing her. But before he could shoot, Dante appeared firing twice. The man fell, but another bullet tore through Dante's shoulder. He stumbled, yet didn't stop. He pulled her close, pressing a hand against her cheek, his voice low and fierce. "You have to run." She shook her head, tears streaming. "I'm not leaving you." He gritted his teeth, the next words barely a whisper. "Then we die together." A grenade exploded nearby, throwing them both to the ground. Smoke and fire filled the hall. The last thing Natalie saw was Dante's hand reaching for her before everything went black. When she woke hours later, the house was in ruins. The smell of smoke, heavy in the air. Dante lay beside her, bleeding but alive. His pulse weak, his eyes half open. She pressed her hands to his chest, sobbing. "Please don't leave me. You said I was safe." His lips curved into a faint smile. Even now, his voice barely a breath. "You are, because you're my reason to live." She felt his hand slip from hers as his eyes closed, and the sound of sirens echoed in the distance. The world went still. She screamed his name into the smoke, not knowing if the man who had turned her life upside down had just taken his last breath. The sound of sirens faded into silence as the wreckage cooled. The fire had burned out, leaving behind nothing but black smoke and broken walls. Natalie sat beside Dante, her hands covered in his blood, refusing to let go of him. She didn't remember how long she stayed there until the guards finally found them. They pulled her away, shouting that he was alive, but barely his pulse. Weak, his breathing shallow. She watched helplessly as they carried him to the waiting car, the night swallowing the flashing lights. Hours later, she stood in the hallway of a private medical wing. The machines hummed quietly, doctors moving around him while she waited outside, her eyes red from crying, her mind replaying his last words. "You are my reason to live." She pressed a trembling hand to the glass, watching his chest rise and fall. The man who once terrified the city now looked fragile, human. Mortal Marco approached his face, pale. "They say he'll make it, but it'll take time. We've dealt with Petrov. He's gone for good." She turned to him, her voice hollow gone. "How?" Marco hesitated but finally answered. Dante's men cornered him in the docks. He didn't make it. She didn't ask for details. She just felt the weight of it, all the war, the blood, the pain ending with a silence that didn't feel like peace days past. She refused to leave his side. She talked to him, even when he couldn't hear her, told him about her fears, her hopes, the baby growing inside her, the life waiting for him to come back one evening as the sun dipped low. The steady beep of the monitor faltered. She froze. Doctors rushed in, shouting orders. She was forced out of the room, her heart pounding, until finally the door opened and a nurse smiled faintly. "He's awake." She ran inside, tears streaming Dante's eyes. Met hers, weak, but alive, his voice rough. "You're still here?" She laughed through tears. "I told you I wasn't going anywhere." He reached for her hand, his fingers tracing her wrist. "I saw you in the dark. I thought I was gone, and then I heard your voice. You brought me back." For the first time she saw him without the mask, without the power. He was just a man who had fought too hard for too long. She leaned closer, whispering, "You don't have to fight anymore." He smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but I still have to make things right." Weeks later, they left the city for good. Dante's empire handed over to Marco and the loyal men who remained. He had no interest in power anymore, only in her and the child. They were about to bring into the world the lake house had been rebuilt, the air filled with the smell of pine and rain. Natalie walked along the water, her hand on her belly when Dante joined her, his arm sliding around her waist. He looked different, softer, the darkness still there but dimmed by something brighter. He said, "I used to think redemption was something you bought with blood, but you showed me it's something you build with love." She turned to him, smiling. "And maybe mistakes aren't always curses. Maybe sometimes they're the universe putting the right souls in the wrong place." He kissed her forehead, the wind carrying his whisper. "Maybe fate made a mistake to bring you to me. But I'll spend the rest of my life proving." It wasn't as the sun set over the lake. They stood together, their reflections rippling across the water behind them in the shadows. An old man watched from a distance, speaking quietly into his phone. The report was wrong. Petrov isn't dead. He's waiting, and far across the border in a dark room a phone rang. A familiar voice answering with a cold smile. "I told you. Jordano would fall in love now. We take everything he loves." Natalie looked out across the lake, her heart calm, unaware that the peace they had fought for was only the calm before the final storm. Snow covered the ground like a white blanket, and the air smelled of pine and smoke. The lake house glowed softly with golden light inside. Natalie sat by the fire, reading to calm, the baby kicking inside her belly. Dante was outside chopping wood, his breath visible in the cold air. Their days had become quiet, simple, almost normal after months of chaos. She finally believed the nightmare was behind them. But peace was fragile. That night, she woke to the faint sound of tires crunching on snow headlights cutting through the dark. She moved to the window, heart pounding. Dante was already awake, his instincts sharper than fear. He pulled her gently behind him, whispering, "Stay here no matter what happens." His tone sent a chill down her spine. She watched as he walked into the night, his figure swallowed by the falling snow outside. 2 black cars had stopped at the gate. Dante's guards were tense hands gripping their weapons, but the voice that echoed through the still air made Dante freeze. The past always returns Jordano. It was Victor Petrov, his face scarred, but alive. Standing beside him were men in heavy coats, armed and ready. "The dead don't stay buried long," Dante muttered under his breath. The standoff felt like forever, until Petrov spoke again. "You took everything from me, my empire, my name, so I took something of yours." Dante's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" Petrov smirked. "The nurse from the clinic, the one who started this. She's not dead. She's been talking, and she told me how it all began. The injection, the mix-up. It wasn't an accident. Inside the house." Natalie's breath caught. She could hear their voices through the open window, her mind spinning. The truth she had buried was rising to the surface. Dante shouted, "What did you do?" Petrov's grin widened. "I paid for that procedure. Jordano, you were never supposed to have a child. It was my heir. She carried your blood only by mistake. Your family, your future. Everything you love exists because of me." The words sliced through the air. Natalie's knees went weak. She stumbled back, clutching her stomach, tears streaming. "No," she whispered. "It can't be true." Dante turned his head slightly, hearing her voice, and in that moment, gunfire erupted, chaos exploding across the snow. Dante fired back, shouting orders, his men taking positions. But there were too many. Petrov's men advanced, the night filled with fire and screams. Dante ran back to the house, shouting her name. She met him at the door, shaking. He grabbed her hand. "We have to go." She could barely speak, his words still echoing in her mind. "You're telling me everything about us was an accident." He stopped only, for a second, his voice breaking. "No, it was fate. But if we don't move now, we won't live to prove it." They ran through the back door into the woods. Bullets tearing through the trees, the snow glowing red and the flashes of gunfire. Petrov followed, close behind, shouting, "You can't escape Destiny Jordano." But Destiny had already chosen its side. Dante turned, firing one last shot, the bullet finding Petrov's heart. The man staggered, falling into the snow, his blood blooming like a dark rose. The silence that followed was heavy. Natalie collapsed against Dante. Sobbing, he wrapped his arms around her, whispering, "It's over. It's finally over." She looked up at him, her tears falling. "I don't care how it began. You're the only truth that ever mattered." He brushed a hand against her cheek, smiling through pain. "Then let's build our truth from here." Months later, spring returned to the valley. The lake glimmered under the morning sun, and laughter filled the house. Natalie cradled their newborn daughter in her arms. Dante watched from the doorway, his eyes soft with wonder. "She's got your eyes," he said quietly, "and your heart." Natalie replied. He knelt beside her, touching the baby's tiny hand, whispering a promise. No more blood, no more war, just love and the life we were meant to have. The fire crackled, the baby stirred, and for the first time in years, Dante Jordano felt peace. Outside, the lake shimmered, reflecting the dawn like a new beginning. Somewhere in that reflection, their story lived on. Born from a mistake, but shaped by destiny. The Mafia boss and the woman who turned his curse into a miracle. The storm had passed, and all that remained was love.